The temperature is -5 and falling, the start of winter in the Ukraine. Conditions are raw and rough and deeply resented. These tents are home for conscript soldiers in the Red Army's 48th Division, personally named the Presidential Division by President Gorbachev after its withdrawal from Czechoslovakia 18 months ago. This is now one of many Red Army divisions with nothing to do, nowhere to go, and no military purpose, except to survive the rigors of daily Soviet life. In a compound behind barbed wire and armed sentries are the division's weapons and live ammunition, heavily guarded against the risk of mutiny by the growing numbers of disaffected troops and the threat of theft by criminal gangs. Officers try to keep up morale by maintaining discipline and fitness, and through the pretense of live fire training and preparation for armed conflict against an enemy yet to be identified. But these images mislead. The 48th is now a renegade division without a mission. Moscow has seized its tanks and artillery and returned them from the Ukraine to Russian soil. The 6,000 officers and conscripts have become disorientated and disillusioned by a year in which responsibility for the division was passed back and forth between the Defense Ministry, the Interior Ministry and the KGB, from a special forces role to an anti-terrorist role, and now apparently to no role at all. Which is why the deputy commander, in an admission which would have been considered treasonable a few months ago, told me he is no longer sure to which ministry his division now answers. How confused are you about which ministry and which organization is now commanding you?
Возникает такое чувство. И оно даже, я скажу, вот сегодняшняя ситуация нас настораживает. Что же будет действительно в будущем?
And now there is a new possibility. This Red Army base could soon be one of many commandeered by the new sovereign government of the Ukraine for the new Ukraine Army. Inside the garages sit hundreds of armored personnel carriers, many in excellent condition because they are maintained daily but never driven, even though the Red Army is, like everyone else, having major problems getting hold of spares and even fuel. President Gorbachev considers these his presidential forces to guarantee the security of the Soviet state. But the Ukraine, in announcing this week the formation of its own army of up to 500,000 men, has served notice that it expects full control of these Soviet troops and this equipment, something the acting commander of the Red Army's 48th Division knows he cannot resist.
Поэтому где-то 50-60% офицеров и, соответственно, солдат могут изъявить желание остаться в составе украинской армии.
Do you have any power to stop your officers and conscripts going from the Red Army to the Ukrainian Army?
Ну, во-первых, этого делать никто не будет, потому как мы стоим на позициях, это дело добровольное. И попытки приостановить этот процесс совершенно никакой не будет.
It is the high level of discontent among officers and their families at the inadequate living conditions they've had to live in since returning from Czechoslovakia, which has fueled the shift of loyalties from the Red Army to the Ukraine Army. 120 officer families have been lucky enough to be given a military flat. A single new block of 40 flats is under construction, but 500 officer families still face an indefinite period in squalid temporary quarters, 18 months after arriving. Every evening, Colonel Viktor Natochi, the third in command, returns to his family's quarters in part of the hospital block, in a corner of what was once the psychiatric ward, an improvisation he had to carry out for himself.
Так жить нельзя. Мы считаем наше существование, не жизнь здесь, а существование, невозможно просто.
Which is why among the officer class, the backbone of any professional army or security force, there is resentment which threatens the very heart of the Soviet military machine, regardless of its future role.
В украинской армии будем служить, конечно.
Но обида не за родину там, не за нашу страну, а обида за начальников, которые нас довели до такого.
условия не будут меняться в лучшую сторону. Конечно, этот вопрос возникнет у многих, наверное. Надо, потому что жить как-то. Отвечаем и за семьи, и за детей.
Сдавать будем, там и определим срок.
It is a resentment which goes right across Soviet armed forces in the Ukraine and to the highest officer level, where a power struggle is already underway for key posts in the Ukraine's new sovereign security structures. The debate now, as witnessed here in the Ukrainian capital Kiev this week, how to manage what could fast become a turbulent period of transition with two armies on Ukrainian soil.
Путем переговоров с Министерством обороны СССР и Министерством обороны Украины, дабы обеспечить нормальную, защиту тех военнослужащих, которые не желают вступать в наши вооруженные силы Украины, и той части, которая уже определилась в отношении того, что будут служить в украинских вооруженных силах.
And in the midst of nationalist passions, the fate of seaborne and land-based strategic nuclear weapons in the Ukraine has yet to be resolved. But to the million soldiers, sailors and airmen in the Ukraine, such problems are for the politicians, as the indignity of hardship forces tough personal and career decisions for those originally recruited to defend what was once the Soviet Union. In theory, this once represented the formidable armed adversary of NATO. But the firm evidence here is that Soviet armed forces, troubled by self-doubt, plummeting morale, and the very questioning of who their ultimate commanders now are, can in no way be seen as a threat to NATO now. Nick Gowing, ITN, at the Red Army's 48th Division, Kharkov in the Ukraine.